You mentioned about, the importance of justice and witnesses and putting cases together. We know it's difficult enough to prosecute rape as a single person, let alone in a context like this. And I want to look at what happened in Kosovo during the Kosovo-Serbia war. And was it 20,000 women at least were victims of sexual violence during that war. And there is a lack of attention to justice there as well. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but there doesn't seem to have been much in the way of putting wrong the crimes that happened there. Is there any hope for the situation in Kosovo?
Yeah, first, let me just address your point about the lack of justice. There are mitigating issues in the case of Kosovo. And unfortunately, there was a case, there were 6 commanders that were prosecuted under the International War Crimes Tribunal of former Yugoslavia. But remember, that was an ad hoc court, and ad hoc courts have end dates. And therefore, as the country was grappling with 20,000 rapes in the aftermath, and many women, and rightfully so, didn't want to speak about it, didn't want to talk about it. It takes quite some time. I've advised Israelis to this fact too. It will take a long time for witnesses to come forward, and they're going to require psychosocial help and support to prepare to even testify, or even if they choose to testify, or even have the opportunity to do so. In the case of Kosovo, the court ended. Yeah. And at the time when the country was beginning to rebuild, get on its feet, and people were beginning to reestablish their lives. Secondly, there is no extradition treaty with Serbia, between Kosovo and Serbia. So there's no cooperation on war crimes. And more to the point, the prosecutor in Belgrade announced, a couple of years ago that she would not prosecute anyone but victims, Serbian victims that were victims of crimes perpetrated by Kosovars against Serbs. There has been a domestic conviction in Kosovo. So if they have the opportunity to get custody of a perpetrator or somebody that has been indicted by a Kosovo court, then perhaps they have brought that case and they have convicted a perpetrator in Kosovo. And let me also add, there's the KLA court. It's referred to as the KLA court in The Hague. It has an office in Pristina. But the fact is, it's called the Dick Marty court, who designed this court, and it was limited to prosecuting KLA leaders who committed or are alleged to have committed war crimes. And I argue in a piece in Foreign Policy that was published in 22 that, and there are lawyers too around the world, that the mandate of this court should be updated. It should be enlarged to include these cases, because not only the rape cases, but there are many civilians that were tortured and injured during this war, and crimes were committed against them, and they will never get justice. So there are mitigating factors.
I mean, we have a situation in Serbia today where the government, society openly celebrates war criminals. You have people who were involved in the government at the time, which committed massacres, who are still in power. We have the example after the 24th of September, where they mourned the death of 3 people that committed a terrorist attack in Kosovo. You have this climate of a really horrible climate in Serbia. And then you have, like you mentioned, the court in The Hague, which is dealing with people from Kosovo. And I would argue that this is a failure of the West in many ways. And we are not really learning from the mistake, because if you look at what's happening with the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue at the moment, Kosovo is being constantly pushed down, while Serbia is being placated. This is my view. What are your thoughts on that?
My observations are also aligned with yours. Let me just say this. With regard to celebrating war criminals, this is a phenomenon throughout the region. It happens in Zagreb too. And every year for the commemoration of the Srebrenica genocide in eastern Bosnia, Serbs actually go out on the road and they mock what's happening. They celebrate war criminals as well. I mean, Vojislav Šešelj is in the parliament of Serbia, rather. And let me just say, this is also being referred to by academics called triumphalism, the celebration of war criminals. They have done it in Croatia repeatedly. When war criminals get released, they're celebrated, they're received, they're being honored. And I just think it speaks to the society as a whole, but it's being led by people who don't condemn it, who will not call out and use the term genocide with respect to what happened in Bosnia, for example. They refuse to do so. And that's an extension of the genocide, the original genocide. That just extends it. It's very traumatizing to people. But there's actually, I just want to say, Alice, there's no shame. There's no shame. Shame, it just doesn't exist in this context. And, people have been unable to reflect because the government and this current government didn't have anything to do with what happened during those years. But they don't have the capacity to say, look, we made a mistake. We wronged people in 1992 to 1999, and let's, apologize for it. But they don't have the capacity to do that because their politics is so extreme, so nationalistic. And let me just address. So there's no capacity to do that. And there are some good people in Belgrade. I know them. They're human rights lawyers. They're activists. The Youth Initiative for Human Rights has confronted the government over and over, but you can't put that on, a few NGOs and expect them to change the whole country. They don't have any power, only through the persuasion and their efforts to educate. But let me also speak to the issue of how Kosovo is being treated. I want to point out that on February 2nd, Jim O'Brien is the new Assistant Secretary for Europe, Eurasia, in the U.S. State Department, gave a speech at University of Sarajevo. And it seems that with regard to Bosnia itself, he made a couple of comments that I don't agree with. One, he said that the Dayton Agreement isn't the issue. I do think the Dayton Agreement is a problem for Bosnia because it has solidified and ossified ethnicity as the first identification throughout the political structure of the country. And I don't want to get into all of that, but what he did say is that the problems with people like Milorad Dodik and Dragan Čović, these extremists from Bosnia, they can no longer be mollified, or we have to confront them. We have to take this on. He didn't specifically address Kosovo, but this is the new assistant secretary who is saying that this mollification of nationalists has got to end. And I think Chris Hill is going to probably go silent. I think that Mr. O'Brien's come in to clean up a mess, quite frankly. And we'll see how much this is being tweaked in terms of the U.S. foreign policy towards the region. But, there was an opportunity to reset that strategy when Joe Biden was elected, and it failed to take place. The efforts have been less than ambitious. I'm trying to be kind. And then the other issue too is that there's going to be a meeting between Biden and the Prime Minister of Germany very soon, and that's another opportunity. You talk about the Balkans and the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue, the situation in Bosnia, that are really in just a chronic state of crisis. And if Dodik does something and attempts to secede in Bosnia, we believe that will trigger a dynamic in Kosovo. Like there will be a reaction to that, and perhaps moves by the Serbs into Kosovo. God only knows what could happen. So there's a lot of concern about U.S. foreign policy in general because it has been very weak, and the EU partnership has not really produced much constructive anything advance. And this criticism of Kosovo is at times I find I'm exasperated with it because I do think that Kosovo has yielded to democratic practices and has really attempted to address some of the major problems within Kosovo, including corruption. I give a lot of credit to President Osmani and Prime Minister Kurti. I think they're the bright light in Southeastern Europe, to be quite frank.